we go. What is going on? It is Thursday. We're back on Small Ball. It's going to be a fun show today. More of a traditional Small Ball coming at you guys. In the past, obviously it's been a lot of me talking and sharing my opinions and sort of getting at different things that I think are important around the league. And then recently, since baseball is on a hiatus right now, we've been doing some different kind of stuff. But today we got some more traditional stuff coming at you. We're also going to be welcoming on a guest at 6:30. More on that to come. Not too big of an intro today. I want to get right into the meat of the show. And here's how I want to start. A lot of times, right, we take results and we compare results to factors, right? And we try to see what kind of factors influence results. So in this case, this is a baseball show talking about a team's success in the win column, right? And there's all kind of factors that play into how successful a team is going to be, right? So the Anaheim Angels, Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, struggled a bit last year. And it's been kind of a theme for them that they haven't been able to get Mike Trout, who many believe to be the best player in all of baseball and all of the world, into the postseason. They got in there once. They were 0-3. They got swept in the division series. So Mike Trout is currently 0-3 in the postseason. Now, we all understand that it takes more than one player. That was weird. Did you guys see that? The wind just blew that door and it freaked me out. Anyway, we all understand that it takes more than one player to accomplish certain team goals, right? So what's interesting to me is that we've seen teams that don't necessarily on paper look like they have the talent to achieve a certain goal, and yet they do. Or in some cases, we see teams that have a lot of talent and underperform. And why am I saying this? Well, a little while ago, a couple days ago, I think it was on Wednesday of last week, I believe, maybe, we did a whole breakdown of the AL East managers. We're going to continue with that series. But here's the thing about the Angels. They go out and they say, we have Mike Trout. We can't waste this opportunity. We signed him to an extension, a $450 million extension, essentially locking him up for the rest of his career. Maybe, probably, at least close to it. And they say we need to get some more talent because we are winning 70s levels, consistently in the 70s last couple of years in win totals. They need pitching. They need defense. They need a little bit more hitting. So they go out and they try to go after Steven Strasburg, can't land him. Try to go after Garrett Cole, can't land him. Try to go after Madison Bumgarner, can't land him. So what do? They get another bat, right-handed bat, Anthony Rendon. And that's all great. Anthony Rendon was 2019's league leader in RBIs. Anthony Rendon essentially carried a Washington Nationals team that has never won a World Series, carried them to a title. He's a great player. But they get Anthony Rendon. And the natural reaction to that, when you have the league's best player, which you guys know that I think that's up for debate, but let's just say for the sake of argument that Mike Trout's the league's best player. You add another top 5 player. Generally speaking, that's a pretty solid team. And a lot of people are now thinking that the Angels have a legitimate shot at the postseason. The Astros are dealing with the whole scandal and the backlash of that. The A's are very strong, but don't necessarily have superstar talent. I think Marcus Semien is a superstar, but that's up for debate. The Rangers are a mess, and the Mariners are even more of a mess. So, you can kind of see where that argument is headed. But the Angels are so far from contending for a title that I can't even begin to describe it. But why am I telling you this? Here's the Angels are going to improve dramatically this season, in my opinion. That's what I think is going to happen. Not because of Anthony Rendon. He's going to play a factor, of course. But the Angels went from one valuable position player to now two. And I would argue you take Mike Trout, Andrelton Simmons, that's two guys who can play. Now you have three. Maybe for Shohei Ohtani, he can play, but he's got to stay on the field. So I'll give you four. They were trying to trade, had a deal in place for Jock Peterson. It fell through. Tommy La Stella is probably your next best offensive option, right? So three, maybe four players that can really play. That's not enough. But they're going to have success this year, way more so than they did last year. Why? Not because of the addition of Anthony Rendon. Not because of Shohei Ohtani staying healthy and on the field. Because they added, in my opinion, the best manager of this generation, Joe Maddon. Okay? And I have talked on numerous occasions about Joe Maddon. And I was recently talking to a former player of Joe Maddon, a player for the Tampa Bay Rays during Joe Maddon's tenure there. And it was really interesting. He was talking about all the different managers he's had in his career. And when he got to Joe Maddon, the first thing he said about him was, he's really not the best decision maker. I really think he lacks decision-making abilities. Interesting. But then he went on to say he's the best manager he's ever had at getting a team ready to play, which is exactly what I've been talking about as the most important thing, in my opinion, for a manager to have, the ability to get a team ready to play. And he said the team was firing when he was at his best. He got everybody ready to play, everybody excited to play, everybody playing at their fullest. Now, Joe Maddon has bounced around, right? He's not one of these managers like a Bruce Bochy, or back, in the Yankee early 2000s, Yankee championship runs with Joe Torre, right? He's bounced around because I think a lot of people, I would venture to say, if his own player is sort of talking about something that he lacks in terms of his in-game decision-making, I could imagine that GMs can see that kind of stuff, owners can see that kind of stuff, other players, right? And I never understood why Joe Maddon isn't thought of as honestly the best manager of this generation, not even an elite manager of this generation. Let's go back a little bit. Joe Maddon in his career has won a World Series with a team, the Chicago Cubs, that had not won a World Series in 108 years. Okay? Before doing that with the Chicago Cubs, he took the Tampa Bay Rays to the World Series, won the American League pennant, and that was a team that had only been in the league for 10 years, a franchise that had only been in Major League Baseball since 1997. A 10-year-old franchise wins a pennant, and since he left, they have been the staple of good, not great. And now he comes to the Angels. And traditionally in sports history, when you pair the game's best player with the game's best coach, it tends to work out. Michael Jordan and Phil Jackson, Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. Now we have Mike Trout and Joe Maddon. So that's going to work. It's definitely going to work. But here's where it gets tricky. The Angels are going to succeed this year after having brought in Anthony Rendon My fear for that franchise is, let's say they win 81 games, 82 games. In that division, that's not going to be enough. The A's and Astros are going to win at least 86, 87 games. They just are. The Astros are too talented. The A's are too deep. So they're not, let's say they win 82 games, right? Now they're battling with, say, the Red Sox, the Rays, the Rangers potentially, if they decide, they want to be a contender, the Indians. These are a lot of teams that they're going to be fighting with, right? So if they have a jump, which they will, like I said, I think they will, I have a feeling that they might get a little bit complacent. We added a top 5 player. We improved. But they need way, 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 way more. They need arms. They need a bullpen. Now they add the game's best manager, which is going to help. But let's not forget, they just added a right-handed bat, which they already had 2 of. And they still need starting pitching. They still need bullpen. They still need speed. They still need defense. Like I said, they're going to succeed a lot better than they did last year. That didn't make any sense. I'm going to say that sentence one more time because that made 0 sense. They're going to have a lot more success this year than they did last year because they bring in Joe Maddon. Anthony Rendon's going to help, of course. But they go from Brad Ausmus to Joe Maddon. Now, Brad Ausmus last year and the Angels, Brad Ausmus and the Angels were league's lowest, number 30 in sacrifice hits. And in his tenure with the Tigers, a 4-year tenure, he started out, for some reason, slightly above average in stealing, bunting, stealing second, both second and third. For some odd reason, halfway through that tenure, he went to dead last in stealing, and he has been record lows in terms of sacrifice bunting, and that's exactly the time that the Tigers started to struggle. Now he comes to LA, and this is a team, like we said, with Mike Trout, best player in the league, and he can't get it done. 0.02 sacrifice hits per game. That's almost a record low. Anyway, to sum this all up, what I'm trying to say is that the Angels are going to improve, but they're going to fall into a big, big hole if they decide, well, okay, we got Anthony Rendon and we improved. Now we got to get another right-handed bat or another big lefty power bat like Joc Pederson. But they still lack defense, still lack speed. Their bullpen is an absolute disaster. Ohtani's good, in the front of that rotation, and Griffin Canning is coming up, but they just don't have enough defensively to get it done. So I'm worried for them that they're going to see this jump and think, we got another big righty bat. That must be the answer, right? But I think a lot of their success, assuming they have some this year, is going to be because of the upgrade at the manager spot. That said, if they are able to figure out that they need to get some guys that can make plays, they need guys that can run and make things happen. Let's understand also that they're going from Brad Ausmus, who, like I said, was, for all intents and purposes, the least aggressive manager in the league last year, 0.02 sacrifice hits per game, to Joe Maddon, who is a old school, more traditional, make things happen kind of manager. They need the pieces to accommodate for that, right? They need guys like not Joc Pederson. So if they're able to understand that, this could be the start of something real for that franchise. But I have a feeling it's not going to turn out that way. And I have a feeling if Anthony Rendon has a good year and Mike Trout has another good year, they're going to say to themselves, well, right now we're doing well with righty bats. Let's get some more. And they're still going to give up too many runs. Shifting gears a little bit, A lot of it, really. That's all I got to say about Joe Madden. Joe Madden is the best manager in the league right now. I really don't understand why he doesn't get the credit he deserves. Um, so part of this proposal, the come back to play proposal, we talked about this yesterday. One thing I did not mention, and I was going to get to it, but we ran a little bit over, so I saved it for today. They shortened Major League Baseball's 2020 entry draft to 5 rounds. 5 rounds from 40. 40 rounds was the draft last year. Now it's 5. Now, obviously, these are special circumstances, and it's possible that it could go back to a 40-round draft next year, but it seems like, the intelligence around the plans, in the commissioner's office are that they're going to shorten the draft. It's probably going to be more of a 10 to 20 round draft going forward. So assuming that's the case, at least a 50-50 split of the draft, cutting it in half, maybe even more. And here's what's going to happen. I'm not going to talk specifically about this year's draft, right? I'm going to save all that stuff for Monday. I have a lot of draft stuff I want to get to. The draft is coming up. It's most likely going to start on June 10th. That's less than a month away. So we're gonna be getting into a lot of draft stuff. I'm an MLB draft fanatic. That's the MLB draft is one of my favorite days of the year. Like, I just get so into it, and we're gonna talk a lot about it. But specifically in terms of them shortening the draft, there's 2 sides to this. There's the players piece and then the baseball, as a league piece. I think we all understand the difficulties that this poses for the players, for the prospects, right? I'm 19 years old. So I graduated high school last year. I know a lot of kids, right, that are either have been drafted or looking to get drafted. And essentially what the draft has become now, if it remains a 5-round draft, obviously 5 rounds of players taken, and after that, teams can sign undrafted free agents for a maximum of $20,000. So the first pick in the 6th round last year, so essentially would be the first guy out this year, received a signing bonus of $301,000. This year, he would earn $20,000. So yes, those opportunities are still there, right? Technically speaking, players have the opportunity to sign with a franchise, but we're going to see a lot more attention on those top level prospects, right? It's going to become essentially a 5-round selection of players because these teams are going to put all of their resources into these drafted players. And I think a lot of these undrafted guys are going to kind of go by the wayside. Not only that, but they're not going to be making enough money to support themselves, right? So obviously there are ways that they can sort of cope with that. And obviously there are some financial, specifics that we don't need to get into. But for the select group of players that really need that financial support, their dreams could end earlier than they have in years past. And that could result in a lot of players that we've seen it over and over again, kind of like these lifelong minor league guys, kind of just grinding it out, eventually are able to make something happen at the major league level. The MLB draft prospects are going to become very, very select, if that makes sense, right? The first couple of rounds is going to be almost like an NBA draft, right? The first couple rounds are going to be where the teams are putting their resources. And after that, these guys are going to be kind of just filler spots for the rest of the minor leagues. And I think we all understand that. So from the baseball side, it's tough because one of the coolest things about baseball is that if you're a 40th round pick, you have a shot. And there are a lot of teams most particularly the low budget teams that build their teams around finding steals late in the drafts. Maybe not the 40th round. I mean, Mike Piazza was a 61st round pick. Mike Piazza was drafted in the 61st round. He's a Hall of Famer. Obviously, that's an exception, but we got Pujols in the 13th. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff late in drafts, and I think we all understand that. But the culture now is going to be so much more, sort of directly spotlight on the top couple rounds, and that's unfortunate because, like I said, baseball is that one sport where it can look like your hopes are completely done and you can pull something out of the hat, right? If you're 26, 27 and you're trying to make it, in the NBA, it's getting a little bit old at that point, right? And again, I think that this is going to hurt small market teams. I think it's going to take away a little bit from the underdog mentality of baseball players in general. I think, fans get into kind of these guys that grind their way through the minors. A lot of fans, have a lot of fun with prospects and like to follow these journeys and stuff. That's really not going to happen too much anymore. Like I said, I know a handful of prospects that either have been drafted or are looking to be drafted that either would not have gotten that opportunity if they had shortened the draft, a couple of years ago, and now probably won't get that opportunity now that the draft is shortened. And again, it remains to be seen exactly how long the draft is going to be, going forward. This year, it's going to be 5 rounds. I hope that they extend it as much as they possibly can, after this year, but it doesn't seem like that's going to be the case because they've been talking about shortening the draft for a while now. It really doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I mean, I think that's one of the things that makes baseball special is the farm systems. And like I said, it's the only sport I think that you have a shot really until you decide not to. Anyway, shifting gears a little bit, I'm going to welcome on our guest in just a couple of minutes. And again, I mean, this draft stuff, we're going to get into specifics of this year's draft next week, but the MLB draft, it's always been so odd to me, the lack of coverage, right? Because obviously the NFL draft, NBA draft are huge occasions, right? And the MLB draft, a lot of even baseball fans don't even know it exists, right? It's that, it flies that much under the radar. But I don't understand how people have this narrative that it matters less than other sports. It's the same exact entry draft as every other sport. The prospects that are going to be taken on June 10th, 11th, and 12th are the ones that are in 4, 5, 6 years going to be at the major league level, right? So just because it takes longer does not mean that these prospects and these picks are any less important. And that's why we're going to talk about it a lot here on Small Ball. Like I said, I have all kinds of draft stuff coming at you guys. I did my top 10 a couple weeks ago. I'm going to revise that. I'm not going to do a mock draft. Jim Callis actually came out with a mock draft today of the first round on MLB.com. I definitely recommend you checking that out to familiarize yourselves with the prospects. But I'm not going to do a mock draft because obviously I don't have a lot of that information. But I can tell you guys who I think is going to be steal worthy and who might end up busting and things of that nature. So like I said, all kinds of stuff coming at you in that regard. So just to kind of recap before I bring on this guest, I think the Angels are going to improve next year, but not necessarily because of their additions on the field, but more so in the dugout with Joe Maddon, right? And if the Angels end up struggling this year, I have a strong suspicion that people are going to blame Joe Maddon, right? They bring in a new manager, they struggle, they add Anthony Rendon, right? But this team just isn't a team that's built to win a lot of games. They have so many holes. Essentially, they have 3, like let's say Ohtani plays 60 games, right? if he's not on the field, then their top 3 players are all right-handed bats. So they're not a well-balanced team. They have a lot of holes. Obviously, a superstar now too, but bringing in Madden's huge for them. They gotta add more arms. I keep talking about this. In terms of the draft, like I said, they're shortening it to 5 rounds this year, probably shortening it to like 10 or 20 going forward. That's really unfortunate. I'm not going to labor on that too much. I am going to bring on our guest. Now, our guest today is a longtime guest of the show. We have Calder Glassman. He's been on many a time, and it's always a great pleasure to have him on. Calder, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
Awesome. I'm doing well too. This draft stuff, there's kind of two sides of it, right? For me, from my perspective. Obviously, I'm a fan of the game. I'm also a person who, to be perfectly honest, is looking to play at the highest level, I possibly can. And, I understand that shortening the draft makes that prospect so much more difficult for somebody like me and all kinds of people that are a little bit better, a little bit worse than myself. So obviously from a personal perspective, it's unfortunate, but from a baseball perspective, what do you think this shortening of the draft means, Calder?
I think you touched on it a little bit, but I think it's just it's gonna kind of prevent obviously players are gonna have the opportunity to sign, not get drafted, sign as like undrafted players, but there are a lot of good players who go late, later than round 10, later than round 15, who end up fighting their way to the big leagues. I think. I mean, you look at nowadays in the majors, you see most of the like elite players, the kind of household names. They're going to be, top 5 rounds. International players getting signed at 16, 17 years old. But then again, you have players here and there who are getting drafted, 15th round, 20th round even, who end up, making it to the big leagues. And I think it's unfortunate that a lot of those guys may not get that opportunity. But I hope that MLB does whatever they can to, give the opportunity to some of those lower level players.
Yeah, totally. I haven't really heard a convincing argument as to why they want to shorten this draft. Obviously teams are going to save a little bit of money, but in the grand scheme, not that much. I mean, those late round picks really don't really break the bank for those teams. So I talked earlier in the show about the Angels, right? And there's a lot of pieces here. There's the addition of Joe Madden, which I love. There's the addition of Anthony Rendon, which I love. Yet I don't think they're a team that's built to contend right now. So it's a multi-layered question for you, Calder. A, do you think that this team could make a run at the postseason? And then B, what do they need to add if that's not the case?
I mean, I'd say we can just pretend, for sake that the season's 162 games. I think they can make a run at a wild card spot. I don't think they can actively compete with the Astros and the A's. Like you said, I think those two teams are just more talented all around. They're more complete teams, less holes. I think the Angels are definitely trending up. I like their lineup. I think they definitely have top half lineup in the league, especially with Rendon, maybe top 10. I think they have some good bats in there, especially if guys like Tommy Lastello can keep up production from last year. But I think for me, the problem is the pitching, just the rotations. Ohtani's a good pitcher, but a lot of health concerns. And beyond that, you don't really have much depth. I mean, they got Teheran from the Braves, and they got Dylan Bundy this offseason. But those guys aren't guys that are going to go out and win you a lot of games necessarily. Kind of guys towards the back end of their careers, and even the bullpen too is definitely lacking depth. So I think with the help of bringing in some new arms, I think they could definitely be there competing with the A's and the Astros in 2-3 years. But I think for now, I don't really see them getting too far in the postseason.
Yeah. I have another question for you, and it's a tough one, but obviously every player brings a certain level of value to a team, right? But if every single player, let's say for instance, has sort of a similar profile, right? A right-handed bat, limited defense, whatever the case may be, how much do you favor, if you're a GM, a balanced, diverse team over just a collection of talent?
I think it's important definitely to kind of have that balance. I think right now, the A's are a team that isn't really a complete team to talk about. A team that can do it kind of all around. The A's or the Angels have good bats, not good arms. I think as a GM, I definitely value a team that's able to play together and do well in all aspects of the game. But I think again, in terms of the individuals, I think the talent's there, especially with the development of some guys. Talk about like even Joe Adell, we'll be seeing in the next year or two, who's a great player. But I just think I think it's important to be able to be a complete team, and I think if the Angels don't get there, they're not going to be able to compete really.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you mentioned Joe Adell. That's even just another ironic piece to this whole Angels thing, right? Their number one prospect coming up, hopefully their face of the franchise behind Mike Trout, has a very, very similar profile to Mike Trout, kind of a five-tool guy that might struggle a little bit in the contact department, but same position, same athletic profile. It's kind of ironic to me that you have this team with almost no balance, and their player, that they're relying on, this prospect, is kind of the exact player that is already locked into that center field spot. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, personally, I don't think they're going to contend for a playoff spot this year. I just think a team like the Indians is just a little bit stronger. I think obviously with the Twins winning the Central, I think the Red Sox might actually have a legitimate shot as well.
I mean, even the White Sox too. You talk about a team that's on the upswing. I mean, the White Sox are going to be a team definitely going to be a force in the AL for the next 4 or 5 years. I think if the Angels want to be able to compete with a team like that who's more complete, they talk about a good rotation, a good lineup. I think they just need to add arms.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, definitely a collection of talent. This might be the year that they really take it to the next level. Yeah, I mean, especially also with this new divisional breakdown, right? This East-West thing, East-West Central thing. That is, this is, I don't know how they're going to do it in terms of the postseason, but this is an Angels team that's going to go up, against the Houston Astros. I mean, think about this starting rotation and bullpen. They got to play the Astros. They got to play the Dodgers. They got to play the Rockies in Colorado potentially. The Padres have a really, really solid lineup as well. I don't think they're going to score enough runs to compensate for how many they're going to give up. Anyway, with that said, I want to transition a little bit, and I want to save a little time for anything that you might have, to say for us at the end. But there's this new game. I don't know if it's necessarily a game, but I'm going to call it a game that I want to introduce on Small Ball. I talked about it a little bit, a couple weeks ago, I think it was. I call it Take Your Pick. So essentially how it works is it's a more interactive thing with our viewers. So you guys, as my viewers, can send in a Take Your Pick. So it's 2 players. Doesn't necessarily have to be current players. You can say 2003 Derek Jeter versus 1964 Harmon Killebrew, or whatever the case may be. And we, or me, depending on who's on, and Calder and I are just going to do it with each other today to kind of, show you how it's done. We have to decide, no stats, no research, just off the top of our head, who we would want for, let's say, tomorrow's opening day, one whole season to win a title. And I think that this could actually be a pretty cool game. Obviously, going to spark some conversation, right? And hopefully, we can come up with some very difficult decisions. But I want to see how this works. I think obviously these trivia games are going well; they're fun, and this is kind of a different take on these trivia games. But hopefully, it goes well. I think it should be fun. So Calder, like I said, we don't have to limit it to current players, but we can obviously. And I'm gonna start you off. So how this is gonna work is I'm gonna give you two players, and you can take a couple, maybe let's say 30 seconds to just organize your thoughts, and then kind of give me a breakdown of what you're thinking in terms of
All
who
right.
you'd rather have tomorrow's opening day trying to win a title. So here we go. I haven't prepared any, so I got to try to come up with some interesting ones as we go. First round, I'm just going to do current players. Keep it a little bit simple. So Calder, if I gave you the choice between Ronald Acuna and Freddie Freeman for one season, who would you prefer?
I think for me, that's got to be Acuna because, again, I think Freeman's good. Like, he's a solid player, definitely top three first baseman. I mean, for sure, he's consistent. But I think Acuna just has so much potential in terms of, like, he could easily, if someone told me that he was going to hit 320, or if someone told me that he's going to hit like 315 with 40 home runs next year, I would believe it because he's that good of a player. He has that much talent, and for me, like, I just don't see Freeman doing that. I mean, you talk about Acuna, he's a guy who can field, a guy who can hit for power, someone who can hit for contact, a guy who can steal bases. I just think, for me, there's so much value that he brings to the team. So I'm going to have to go with Acuna.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, just for the interest of time, I guess we're not going to go back and forth. We'll just have you answer mine and I'll answer yours. So maybe I'll generate sort of a report of what we come up with and post that on my channel. But yeah, so now it's your turn. Yeah. I mean, I'll just give some quick thoughts. I mean, this is a Braves team that, I mean, has a lot of options that they can turn to, in terms of their face of the franchise, right? You got Acuna, Freeman, Ozzie Albies, is a guy in there. I think Dansby Swanson, is going to improve and eventually be, a top level player as well. But that Braves team is really, really solid. But I've said this a couple times. I would not be surprised, and I think with the shortened season, this might change, but I would not be surprised if they finish the year with the most wins in the regular season. I really would. All right, Calder. So what do you have for me? Let me see your let me get your two options, and I'll take my pick.
All right, I'll go with Yordan Alvarez or Gleyber Torres.
Ooh, I gotta go with Gleyber Torres. And it's really not that close. Here's why. I think both players. So the one knock that I do have with Gleyber Torres is defense, right? And not that his defense is terribly bad, but unfortunately, I don't think he's really a good fit for the shortstop position. Which I think now with the loss of Didi, he's gonna have to, that's gonna be demanded of him. I don't think he's a natural shortstop. I think at second base he's about average. I think he's a defensive playmaker, but doesn't necessarily make all the routine plays. And that's the one knock I have on him. And then you look at Yordan Alvarez, who really brings nothing to the table defensively and is almost exclusively a DH. And the biggest thing for me, the biggest difference, right? And Gleyber is a contact-first guy who actually could hit 40 home runs. I mean, with the shortened season, probably not, obviously. But, the equivalent of 40 home runs this year, being a contact-first guy. Alvarez is, a power-centric kind of guy who did hit, if I'm not mistaken, I think like 315 last year. So obviously can do both as well. But the main difference for me, and the reason why I take Gleyber, is Yordan Alvarez in the ALCS was 1 for 16. Postseason numbers really, really, really struggled. And that, sort of indicates to me that against the elite arms, Gleyber Torres is going to have a lot more success, which is obviously where it really counts. I think Alvarez, while he's a tremendous talent, a lot of times preys on mediocre pitching. And I think Gleyber is at a point in his development where he's actually really able to handle the top level of arms that he's going to see at any level. So in a big spot, less than 2 outs, something like that, or even you need a base hit, I definitely turn to Gleyber over Alvarez against postseason level pitching. So I'd take Gleyber. All right, let's get a little bit fancy here. I'm going to ask you, Calder, if you would prefer Mike Soroka or Tim Anderson.
Wow.
So a very, very, difficult question. Two very different players, obviously. But that's just what we got to deal with. There is no filter on take your pick. These are, we gotta get down to the nitty gritty. So who would you prefer, Mike Soroka or Tim Anderson?
For one season? Let me think. That's tough.
It was really tough. I have no idea who I would take. I have to think about that.
I mean, it's obviously going to depend on the team, but
True.
I think for me, I would value Soroka as like an ace pitcher because I think personally, I think he's a viable ace. Like, I'm not exactly sure what his numbers were last year, but ERA around like 2.6, 2.7, I think. I mean, for me, that viable ace is more valuable for me than Tim Anderson, who's like good player, had a great year last year, but then again, like that's just 1 year of production, and he's just he doesn't hit for huge power. Obviously a good average hitter, but I mean, I think for me, being able to trot out that guy once every 5 days, who's basically just a stud pitcher, young, probably going to improve a lot year to year. I'd have to go Soroka.
Yeah, Devin, I think I would actually agree. Maybe, just perhaps you're a little biased being a pitcher yourself, but you definitely make a good argument as well. No, I was kidding about that. But all right. So that was a tough one. I apologize for making you, have to really dig deep for that one. But fire away. Let me hear yours. Maybe we'll, round 2, maybe let's get a little bit more complex, shall we say.
All right. I'll say, how about Fernando Tatis or Marcus Semien?
Wow. All right, so my initial reaction is obviously this comes down to how much we think Tatis is going to improve this year. That said, if I'm a GM, I think I have to go with Semien. I definitely feel more confident in that pick. I think that everything that Tatis could bring to the table as far as his upside, I think Marcus Semien shows flashes of. I think Tatis has the ability to hit for more power. He's a more dynamic, player in terms of his base running ability, obviously his speed. I think defensively, Marcus Semien is a lot more sound, but Fernando Tatis is one of the best playmaking shortstops in the league. As far as making the difficult play goes. But Semien, I could easily see hitting for, plus 300, put up some solid power numbers last year. He could be a 25 to 30 guy in the home run department. Marcus Semien has led the entire league in assists in 3 of the last 4 seasons. So I think the most underrated defensive player in Major League Baseball as it stands. Fernando Tatis, like I said, is an excellent playmaker, but his throwing ability is lacking. His throwing accuracy in particular is lacking a little bit. Obviously, this comes down to how much Tatis is going to improve. I think if he improves, as an average amount, right? I don't really know exactly what that means, but he had a great season last year. I think if he improves a little bit from that, he's not quite the player Marcus Semien was last year. Let's not forget Marcus Semien was an MVP finalist. So two very, very talented shortstops. I think Fernando Tatis even more talented, but I think Marcus Semien a little bit more fundamentally sound, a little bit more consistent. I would have to take Marcus Semien.
Yeah.
All right, round 3. We have about 10 minutes left, so maybe we can get in 5 rounds. We will see. But now all the wheels are off, right? I mean, now it's coming. This is gonna be. I'm gonna start throwing in maybe some old timers. I gotta come up with a tough. Okay, here we go. I'm gonna say, Calder, would you rather have Bryce Harper or Wilson Contreras?
Wow. Let me think. Bryce Harper or Wilson Contreras. Very different positions.
Absolutely.
I'm going to probably go with Bryce Harper just because, like, Contreras, I just, trust Bryce Harper more. I think he has more value. I think Contreras is a good defensive catcher. Obviously, he great arm, pretty good defensive catcher. But for me, you're talking about, Bryce Harper is a guy who has a lot of raw talent, obviously has done it at an MVP level throughout his career. Last year he had a pretty good year, not great by any means, especially for making, $300-something million on a $300-something million contract. But I still think Bryce Harper is just a better overall player in terms of, everything considered. I personally would value a good defender in the average. I mean, obviously a catcher is pretty valuable, but for a guy like Harper, I mean, good defender can easily hit 40 home runs in a year, and I just think he's done it. He's done it at such a high level. Whereas Contreras, who's been good, but has never been great, has never broken the barrier of being an elite top 20 player in the league. So for that reason, I'm gonna have to go Harper.
I would take Harper as well, actually. Obviously, I think catcher is a little bit more important, but I think there's a fire under Bryce Harper right now. I think he's figured himself out mentally. I think he's matured since he's arrived in Philadelphia, and I think he's poised to become much more of the player he once was and a much, much better and more valuable teammate and locker room presence as well. All right, so Bryce Harper it is. Round 3. Calder, what you got?
All right, let's see. I think I'm gonna go with Javier Baez or JT Realmuto.
That's an easy pick for me. I'm going to go with JT. I think JT, if I were to have, a fantasy draft of I'm a GM, right? And I got to pick my team for one season. JT is clear top 10 for me. I might even push him a little bit higher than that. We talked about value at the catcher spot. He's the best of the best at that spot. 47% caught stealing rate last year. Consistently a 280, 290 batting average for JT. The power showed signs of being very solid last year. He's probably, about average in terms of, overall top level hitters, especially at the catcher position. He has more than enough power to suffice. Hitting for contact is there. His game management and game calling ability is off the charts. And like I said, 47% caught stealing rate was clearly the best in the league last year. Baez, to me, is a great playmaking defender. Obviously hits for power. Obviously brings a lot of energy. But the swing and miss, rate for me, as well as the quite a couple too many errors in my book, similar to Gleyber Torres, even more extreme. Absolute playmaker, can make almost any play that's humanly possible, but I'd like to see him take care of some of the more routine plays. I got to go with JT. I think he brings a lot more value. I think Baez is a lot more electric, a lot more dynamic. But if I'm trying to win a title, Baez is good. JT is great, if not excellent. All right, round 4. Now it's going to get testy. I'm going to try to come up with a current player and a historical player. I'm not sure how familiar you are with, your old timers here, but I'm going to give you Calder. Would you like Okay. Walker Buehler. No, I changed my mind. Not Walker Buehler. Would you like Jacob deGrom or prime Greg Maddux?
Wow. Jacob deGrom for this year or prime Greg Maddux?
Yes.
Ooh, that's tough.
Neither Calder or myself, had the opportunity to watch Greg Maddux play. He was a bit before our time, but obviously a pitching legend, and the numbers more than speak for themselves.
I think I'm gonna have to go with Greg Maddux just because he was so great. I mean, some of those years. Obviously, he had a great team around him in Atlanta. The dynasty, the supposed dynasty that only won one World Series. But I think the fact that he did it at a high level in the postseason, he's been there, done that. Even obviously didn't have the team didn't have crazy success against the Yankees and those other teams, but just in general, postseason pitching. Talk about like absolutely dominating teams, throughout the early '90s, into the late '90s. Facing great teams, dynasties like the Yankees. I think deGrom's a great pitcher, but I think that deGrom hasn't really shown that he can do it in the postseason. Not that that's his fault, because he plays on a team that's just hasn't been very good. But if you're talking about just like a clutch pitcher who's not only clutch but just great, all around throughout the season and into the postseason, I think Greg Maddux just holds more value in terms of like ERA. I mean, I don't know what Greg Maddux's numbers were. I'm sure they were great. Jacob deGrom is obviously going to put up great numbers too, but I think just you can't really value Jacob deGrom this year above Greg Maddux, who was dominating great teams there in the '90s, winning Cy Youngs.
Yeah, totally. I mean, obviously, you can't really go wrong with either choice, but yeah, you're right, and I don't think it's fair to say that Jacob deGrom is an unclutch pitcher. He really hasn't had those opportunities, but yeah, I mean, Greg Maddux is about as good as they come. All right, let me hear your round 4, Calder. We'll have time for this, and then we'll do one more round to finish it up.
All right, let's see. Let's go with. This is tough. Trying to think of a good one. Let's go with prime, like 2003, 04, 05, Alex Rodriguez or Cody Bellinger.
Wow. That's pretty funny. Like, as soon as I heard that, I had an immediate answer, and then I immediately changed my answer, and now I have no idea. I gotta take a second to think about that. Wow. If you were here on Small Ball for my last edition of Chatting with Calder, you heard that I actually would take Bellinger as my top center fielder, which means that, to me, he's probably pushing a top 1 or 2 player in the league. So for me to put A-Rod above him, that would indicate that I feel 2003 prime A-Rod would be at least close to, if not the top of our league today. I got to make a pick here. I'm going to take A-Rod. I think Cody Bellinger is a 5-tool player. I do think his defense is very, very, very good. I don't think it's quite as elite as most people think. You alluded to his swing and miss totals, earlier in his career. Last year, improved, but over the course of his career, swing and miss has been one of his downsides. And obviously only a couple of seasons to base this off of. A-Rod's numbers in the middle of his career, I mean, his 2007, I know we didn't talk about, I mean, this was 3, 4, and 5, but his 2007 season was like, it was just silly. Like, it was just, it wasn't even, it's like, it's disrespectful to even look at. Like, it was just incredible. Yeah, I mean, just the way that he abused the top of the top in terms of pitching, including the postseason, clutch, defense, speed, at that point in his career. I think the power is comparable to Bellinger. I would take his contact over Bellinger. I would take Bellinger's defense slightly over A-Rod. And I think in a big spot against any pitcher you want to throw out there, I think I'd take A-Rod. That's actually going to do it. We're actually going to run out, of time here. But Calder, if you want to do one more round, or you want to just wrap it up as is, and we'll come back to this another day.
You give me one more set of players, and then
This is going to be interesting. Calder, would you prefer Joey Gallo or Joey Gallo or prime Robinson Cano?
Oh, easy. I say prime Cano for sure. I mean, Gallo's good. I mean, he obviously has very crazy power, but I think his average is he's not a great hitter for average, not like great defensively. And that being said, strikeouts were down last year, but he's a guy that's going to still strike out a lot relative to other players. And Robinson Cano, some of those years, I mean, he was the best second baseman in the league, I think, by a long shot. When he was really producing. And I think Cano's just, even though Cano wasn't really a standout defender either, but I think just overall, in terms of like a well-rounded player, a guy who's a better pure hitter, those like 2009, 2010 kind of those Cano with the Yankees, those years. I think it's just great. He was just a beast. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I robbed you of a round 5 level question, but I had a lot of fun with this. I don't know how you felt this went, but I definitely like to revisit this new game. Take your pick. That's going to do it for today's show. A big thanks again to Calder Glassman. Obviously it's always a pleasure having you on the show. Really good stuff today. We talked some draft. We talked some Angels. We played Take Your Pick. Coming at you guys Monday with some draft stuff, some more, all kinds of stuff coming next week. We got draft, we got Tuesday top 10, a lot of stuff on tap. So thanks again, Calder. Have a good one. And yeah, of course. And to all of my viewers, thank you again so much for watching. Like, subscribe, tell someone about the show if you feel inclined to do so, all of those things. Thanks for watching. Have a good weekend. Stay healthy, safe, and happy. And I will see you guys, or you will see me. I probably won't see you, but it's possible. If you call into the show or whatever the case may be on Monday, have a good one. Take care. Peace.